guess, from a podcast called "This Podcast Is Making Me Thursday Want to Talk to You," and I think and I said, you don't have to tell me what it's about. I said, if it's called "This Podcast Is Making Me Thirsty," you definitely don't need to tell me what it's about, and I'm going on. This is what I want to do.
It's a Seinfeld podcast. It's called "This Podcast Is Making Me Thirsty." But I thought, this is what a podcast should be.
I just did the Seinfeld guys pod the other day. I came up with
these pretzels are making me thirsty.
Oh,
that one. Shout out. We've done it. I've done it. Have you did it?
I've not gotten a chance to do it yet. I'm looking forward to it. It's so fun. They're so fun.
When I don't know, it must have shown up in my feed, but I see these guys tweeting about Seinfeld. I'm like, oh, what's this? And I find it's a podcast called "This Podcast Is Making Me Thirsty."
One of the most popular Seinfeld podcasts is "This Podcast Is Making Me Thirsty," co-hosted by Chris O'Hara and Tony Chulin.
Welcome to This Podcast Is Making Me Thirsty, the number one destination for Seinfeld fans. This episode 184. Today's guest is a singer and an actress of stage and screen. You know her from Chicago on Broadway, Finding Nemo, Finding Dory, Home Improvement, How I Met Your Mother, Modern Family, News Radio, Curb Your Enthusiasm, and of course, she played Georgia's secretary Ada. In two season 6 Seinfeld episodes, The Secretary and The Race. Please welcome Vicki Lewis. Vicki, thank you so much for joining.
Oh, yes, of course. I'm happy to be here.
What an honor.
The big arms going there.
Yeah, big arms.
Both of you and me, all three of us.
Yeah.
Watching? Okay, cool. Just so I know.
It could cut also to just you or just me or just Chris.
How dare you edit? Great.
Tony's a great editor. I mean, yeah, what an honor to have you with us tonight. Big fans, but take us back. Of course, this is December of '94. I know, not too long ago. Season 6 of Seinfeld. The episode aptly named "The Secretary" after yours truly there. So tell us, how'd that role come about? Tell us about the audition process. What do you remember?
I think I'm not faulty. I think I'm pretty good on this. So I had done let's see. I'll try to shorten the story. Marjorie Rose, who was a writer on the show, her and I were friends, and I had just done Damn Yankees, I think, and so I had a little bit of an advantage because. Wait, did Jimmy Burrows direct the Seinfelds? No, it was ZZ Top. No, that's who directed
Curb. Larry Charles, directed your
Larry.
Curb.
I loved
Larry
him.
Charles,
He's got the beard. So who did direct? Oh, it was Lee Shalit. That's right. But anyway, they wrote it for me, which is crazy because I was such a youngster. Well, I wasn't young, but I was so brand new to television. And Marjorie somehow convinced them to write it for me. And so that's what happened. And that has really never happened since. I never get offered roles like that.
Oh, wow. So you didn't even audition then? They went on the word of Marjorie. Oh, wow. Yeah. Her and Carol Leifer, I believe, wrote it together. So that's, we were talking about that earlier, me and Chris, that it's interesting that it was, two strong women writers. So that's wild. Did you know by any chance? Well, so your major scene, obviously your first scene with George, with Jason Alexander, obviously one of the classics of all time in Seinfeld lore. I'm giving you a raise, and it's definitely doable. All of that great stuff. Had you worked with Jason at all? Because I know you do theater. I know he was big there.
Jason, but the second Broadway show that I did. And you'll just cut me off if this isn't really scanning properly because it's so many years ago. I have a distant memory of it. But it was Wind in the Willows, and I was the mole. Kenneth wrote this beautiful novel for his son who was blind. I don't know if you remember the lore of Wind in the Willows, and that's why it was written. But so I was in a strange position of actually having been already cast. So Nathan Lane came in for the role of Toad, and so did Jason Alexander. I ended up going with Nathan. But so he and I were kind of like in a sort of satelliting around each other in theater. I knew of him, but I was so glad when I found my scenes were with him because he's a theater actor. So he and I were just like, he's like, let's rehearse it. I was like, oh yay, like we're rehearsing. Like it's a luxury in television. So and then ever since then we've done, gosh, a handful of shows together in LA. We both theater people. And yeah, I adore him. And then we ended up doing the table read episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm. Yeah, same.
Of course. Yeah. It's funny, yeah. Well, you mentioned Nathan Lane. He just had the musical Dix with Larry Charles as another connection.
Yeah.
And fun story. Supposedly, my father once told me Nathan Lane is like our second cousin. Whether that's true or not, who knows? Maybe someday we'll find out. Yeah.
Have you ever done the like what's it called? You know, where
no.
The tree. What is that called?
No. Yeah, ancestry. No.
Sounds like yeah.
But anyway, we digress. So you know, Marjorie Gross. You mentioned her. Obviously, gone way too soon.
Oh my God.
A gem. Yeah. So tell us about. So you worked with her prior to Seinfeld, obviously.
With her, we were just. I was a waitress, a Catch a Rising Star, a Comedy Cellar.
Oh, okay.
Because I wasn't a comic, but I was a waitress in all those comedy clubs, and so that's how I came to know her, Margaret Smith, and
Any crossing paths with Larry or Jerry when you were waitressing at the clubs?
Say
with
that
Larry
again, Jerry?
Was there any crossing paths with Jerry or Larry David when you were waitressing at those clubs?
Nope.
No.
Mm-mm.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so just one of those things. And then, yeah, you know, it's a small world in New York. Well, in theater in general. But in New York, there was really, especially in the 80s, there was such a sense of community. So we all knew each other.
Yeah, you mentioned that the rehearsing with Jason for that scene, which I would imagine must have been fun because that scene is so, you know, there's so much going on there between the two of you, and then when you're behind the couch and all of that stuff, right? Was
behind
that was
the desk, mind
yeah,
you.
yes, and then was that as far as I know, you said you rehearsed it a lot, but in the moment when you were shooting, was there any improv going on there, of like how you guys like, you know, dealt with that, the physicalityness of it, if you will?
Because we mimed the making out during rehearsal.
Okay.
So when we got into the moment, we were both sort of, you know,
teach them how to undo the bra the right way and where to put the pillow.
I
and all.
taught him a thing or two, and then like in 2010 or something, we did this musical called "I Love My Wife." And there's a bit in the musical where we're all under the blanket at the same time. And he was wearing nothing but a leopard Speedo. So I've like had these very intimate moments with Jason over the years. Yeah.
Our audience will love that visual, Vicky. Thanks for that one.
Yeah, because there were 4 of us in the bed. I'll try to find a photo. But actually, I'm laying down like this and the blanket's over and like, here's his butt. It was really, we were all cramped in there. There was 4 of us. Yeah.
Incredible. So this was
I am sweating like Hunter Biden at customs. Like it is so sweaty in New York. Forgive me. Anyway, go
ahead. So this was 94.
Yeah.
Right. Speaking of New York,
big
year, Knicks Rangers, the whole thing. So, you know, you were done some sitcoms, right? The Home Improvement, some Murphy Brown. Grace Under Fire, the whole thing.
Oh, was Murphy Brown before Seinfeld?
You actually played a secretary on Murphy Brown.
Yeah, it was Secretary 69. They were out of actresses. So I got really lucky. Like, remember they would number the secretaries? They were on number 69 when I got it.
That's funny. Kramer
directed that as well. But I don't remember if Murphy Brown was before or after.
According to IMDb, it's before. It was 93.
Okay.
And later on, Kramer plays the secretary in Murphy Brown, which is kind of funny. Yeah, in a Seinfeld episode. Yeah, I don't know how much you actually That's a good question. Actually, I know this was season 6, so it had already taken off by now. I mean, pretty much by middle of season 4, it become the juggernaut it became, although we were watching it early on. But so I'm assuming you knew that going in. That was there. Maybe there wasn't pressure since you were friends with Marjorie, but did you get a sense on set like
more pressure?
There was, yeah, because you were like, oh, I got the job, I have to perform, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So you could tell on the set that this was like a well-oiled, like top show, and that kind of was there for you, like pressure wise.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, that was the day or the week that they found out, that they got their syndication checks. And I just remember sitting there like, oh, what's that check? It's 7 million. Like they were sort of mumbling about the amounts. And I was like, what's happening? Like,
wow.
Yeah. But once you meet them, like Jerry is just like a Labrador puppy. He's so easy to be with and charming. And, they were all just lovely. They went out of their way to be lovely.
Yeah, and the secretary, obviously, it's your name, the secretary, but real fun episode. You had Kenny Banya, Steve Heitner, which we could talk about later. I know you reconnected with him on Curb, Willie the dry cleaner, the whole Uma Thurman stuff. So I guess do you remember who you hung out with during that set? Was it the guest stars, or were some of the main characters more welcoming? Do you recall?
I felt sort of like I was it was just me and Jason against the world. No. And then I didn't know anyone, and I know who those people are now, but I didn't know them at the time. So I just sort of sat up in that audience, and waited until it was time to rehearse my stuff. I sort of hung out alone. I was a little intimidated.
Right. Yeah, this was episode 95, so that tracks with the syndication thing. It's right around when they would have got syndicated.
Yeah.
So you got brought back for the race, the next episode, which is an all-timer in our opinion as well. Was that known? Did you know you were going to be in 2 episodes do you remember when they hired you for the secretary?
No.
Or they called you back for the race just, to be in that scene? That was kind of they do that a lot with loyalty, but I wasn't sure if you knew that going in, if you were going to have two episodes.
Do it with royalty? Is that what you
loyalty. They seem to be loyal to bringing guest stars back for other roles.
I didn't know that. But it's funny, like I'm 64 and that was 94. And of all my body of work, that's the thing that people stop me for the most.
Incredible.
It resonated with people. So
yeah. In the race episode, the second episode, you wore your hair down.
I was really happy about that because
I was just saying, was that your choice?
Or look,
Yeah. Did they say now that you've already been with George, now you let it down? Was that like a decision that was made specifically?
Yeah,
or you just
I think it was scripted.
Oh wow.
Yeah. But that's resonated. It's so funny because I was like, oh, I'm on TV and I'm like, I have to wear like a bun. I look like Emily Dickinson. It's like when I was on Grey's Anatomy and I felt like really good in the makeup chair. And then I went, to be on the set, and she comes at me with that blue marker, which they do to everybody because everybody's getting a facelift. And she was just like, why are you marking on my face? Like I didn't understand. I felt so pretty until then. But I digress. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean and your voice, like I'm very good at what I do. Like, was that all you, or was there a direction given from Larry or Marjorie or Carol, or was that
you just Larry spoke? I didn't have any interaction with any of them regarding the voice or anything. I was just doing it. Does it sound like I'm doing a voice? Like I think I was just oh no, I was doing a little thing, but no, I did that on my own.
Yeah, no, it was masterful and perfect.
Yeah, it was perfect. Especially during the interview. You did it great in the interview too with Jason, and you're like, I take care of my mother. I won't be out late. So you said Larry wasn't really interacting with you on Seinfeld, but here you go. You're on Curb Your Enthusiasm, as you talked about earlier. How did that come about? Was that a call from Larry David, or did you audition for that, or how did that work? I auditioned,
and I went in and they give you, I don't know if you know how those auditions work, but you get like this tiny sliver of paper. And so all my paper said was, my daughter has a rash on her I don't know if I can say that word or not.
Yeah.
Right? And so I came up with all the stuff around it, and I was making him laugh. Like it was so fun. Yeah, I had a great time. He can be intimidating. And I remember I sat down to do the lunch scene, and I was like, "How are you doing? I know you guys were here late last night." He's like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Oh, I can either go like this or I can lean in." And I went, "Well, Larry, what I meant was I had heard you were here late and I was wondering if you got any sleep." And he just immediately softens. I think it's just, I don't know, it's his go-to. But then we started to talk and laugh. We had the best time. Yeah.
Yeah, clearly evident. I mean, you fit like a glove on that show as well. And obviously, the irony of it all is that was the Seinfeld episode, right? When they all came back, and we mentioned Steve Heitner, and then he came back on the episode. It's probably good to reconnect with him. So it must have felt like a homecoming, if you will, 10, 12 years later, whatever it was. Did it kind of just feel like it did when you were on set, or how different were those two shows?
No. Because Larry was more, he was, what's the word? He was more present. And I remember that the pussy shot, there was a rolling camera. So anybody that messed up their line, they had to stop and go back. So it was like the camera rolled, it was Kramer, then it was like the four of us on that soundstage. And I was like, oh God, if I don't say this right. But he stopped me a few times and he just kept saying, and I didn't feel like I was acting, but he said, even less, even less. And it was so brilliant because just that subtle, I have to leave. My daughter has a rash on her pussy. I mean, it was really great direction. But it was at a certain point I couldn't get through it. I was too funny.
Wow. Yeah, it's really interesting. I just rewatched that Curb again today, getting ready for this to talk to you. And it's crazy how they just recreated the set, recreated the table for the table read. I was curious, were there actual, to your knowledge, like Seinfeld, like people that worked on Seinfeld there, aside from obviously Larry Charles, who directed, but did they use them in like the table stuff, or that was just strictly, the main four? Because everything looks so real, like they just like plopped Seinfeld down, right?
Real. But also like they had, look, this is what happens. You're my age. They had Brooks's brother, Big Dave, like Dave.
Oh yeah, Funkhauser. Yeah,
right, Funkhauser. That's right. Yeah. But we were all sort of congregated in one area, and it was very cool. I just, but yeah, we were all there together. I wasn't aware of like who the crew was.
Right, yeah. But the visual from you, was that like surreal to be like, I'm on the Seinfeld set again, as if they just like recreated it? It must have been kind of wild.
It was wild. Yeah.
You had two incredible I'm paralleling both here in some degree. So obviously Larry texted your daughter, just crazy stuff.
Oh my God, it was so fun.
Yeah, but him doing that, George giving you a raise behind the desk. I mean, two just memorable, incredible, bizarre scenes that we'll never forget. And obviously from the mastermind of Larry David. Do you have a preference on which one is more memorable to you, or did you enjoy doing more, perhaps?
They were both equally memorable. I think, as I've gotten older, I think I've become a better actor. And I think the role on Curb was ultimately a little meatier, and I love the improv element. So I was really kind of proud of that one, I think. But I enjoyed them both equally, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask you actually, because your breadth of in your career is, between singing and Broadway stage, and then things like, every sitcom under the sun. Obviously, news radio was the biggest one as far as tenure and that sort of thing. But I mean, you've done it all basically, is what I'm saying. And you mentioned you like the improv on Curb. Overall, what do you prefer? You tell us, but it sounds like you like the Broadway or the stage.
Yeah,
But I just,
I
what
like
is that that's your
yeah.
go-to?
And it's funny because that's what ultimately I think got me the job on news radio, because I was doing Damn Yankees Out of Town, and Jimmy Burrows had come to see it. And so when I went in for news radio, he was like, "Oh my God, that's," because he has such a lineage of theater in his family and his background. And what saved me also was I didn't know who any of those people were, because I was just hanging out in New York. If I had actually known who Jimmy was, who Phil, what, like Dave was there, I would have been freaked out, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned Larry, you mentioned Jerry, but for our money, I don't think you could find a funnier human being than Phil Hartman. I mean, he was a man amongst boys on that Saturday Night Live set.
Was he?
From Unfrozen Caveman Lawyer to doing Phil Donahue, right? Who may he rest in peace. I mean, what a gem, and he must have been incredible to work with.
He was so incredible, and he is. I'm sure you already know this, but he was a graphic artist, and that's what he wanted to do.
Yeah, he did album covers, right? A lot of album covers.
Yeah, but he'd sit at the desk there while we were rehearsing, and he'd be doodling, and I'd be like, "That's your doodle," And he was not a mentor, but in a way he was. He taught me, he's one of the first things he said to me was, "Just remember, this doesn't last. This money, this moment doesn't last forever. Be smart with it." And so he taught me what the stock market was and how to invest my money. He was kind of like not fatherly, but he took care of me in a sense, like, because I was the sort of novice in terms of television and stuff. So yeah, I really loved that. And we were both living in Malibu at the time. And we were both in these relationships that were not necessarily ideal. And so we sort of had this quiet sort of, every now and then I'd run into him at the newsstand in Malibu, and he'd be like, "How do you do it?" And I'd be like, "I don't really know. How's it going with you?" Like we were in this strange, we had a symbiotic thing going on.
Yeah, I mean, he was obviously one of the best. That's touching. The speaking, I mean, just in general, I mean, you just named a bunch there, and Chris did too. I mean, the news radio creator, Paul Sims went on to do a lot of stuff. James Burrows was a director, like you said. Actually, Tom Sharonis directed a lot of news radio as well, and he's come from Seinfeld lineage. He's the early Seinfeld.
Oh, is he? See,
he directed all the first 5 seasons of Seinfeld, pretty much, and then went on. But it's just you worked with so many, and you touched on Phil Hartman, but it's just like it's incredible the amount of especially just on that show alone, news radio. But just kind of touching back on Seinfeld a little bit, because I don't think we talked about it too much, but also on Curb maybe. But did you have any interactions with Julia or Michael Richards at all? I know we talked about Jerry and Jason a lot, but I'm just curious if you had any interactions.
I did, the comedy club sort of moment had happened for Michael, and I just, my heart was kind of breaking for him. I remember I just was looking and I thought, gosh, he seems really isolated. It's not that anybody was treating him, any certain way, but I just thought he must feel incredibly alone. And so but I didn't really talk with him, and I wasn't in the scenes with Julia. The funny thing is Larry messed up the scheduling, or somebody did, probably not Larry, at some point. And so I had already flown back to go to Palm Springs. I was singing at David Lee, who created Frasier, one of the creators of Frasier. He holds these sort of fundraisers and we sing and stuff. And I got this text from my manager, and she's like, they need you back on the set. And I was like, well, I'm in Palm Springs. And she was like, I know, the schedule got messed up. So Larry sent his plane for me. So it was
Wow.
just sort of surreal, because I'm like, wait, I think I got $800, for the thing, but like you're flying me on this plane. Like it was sort of,
Holy cow.
Yeah,
I bet you it's, I was going to say, I bet you it's nicer than the Ted Danson plane for Seinfeld fans. We'll get that reference, but that's funny.
Okay.
He sent
What does
you.
that mean though? Did he
Well,
ever?
in the finale of Seinfeld, they send a plane to them, and George complains it's not as nice as Ted Danson's plane, and so now that Larry David is probably, by this point he's doing Curb, he's definitely has the money probably. But that's incredible. That just shows again the loyalty and just like, to be such a mensch like that, to say, hey, let's make sure she gets out here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Those guys were really, really fantastic. Yeah.
Syndication money helps too for sending that plane, right, Vicky?
Oh, ow, I mean.
So tell us a little bit. So you grew up in Cincinnati, is that true?
Yeah.
All right. So, and were you stay there your whole childhood? When did you get that? I guess
I left Cincinnati as soon as I learned to walk, I think. No, I mean, I did bug out, I remember I was working at Sears. Like, remember Sears in the mall?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Now you're
I
at the
was
mall.
up in the fabric store, and there was like really just not a lot of action in the fabric store. And I read the paper, and it said auditions for Opryland, and I was like, what? And I remember I just like it's like I left my body. I put the scissors down. Stopped cutting the fabric. I just walked out, and I drove myself to the audition. And I got that job. And then I met all these actors, Faith Prince, Jason Graw, all these people that were coming back to CCM to go to musical theater school, but I was going to business school. And it was like what was I saying? Hey, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. What was I on about? Just how I ended up.
Oh, so you went to the CCM? You mean the college conservatory of music?
What was the point I was making?
When you got the itch, the bug to get out there.
You must have got something there. Yeah.
But I didn't have my family didn't have the kind of money to go to CCM. Plus, I hadn't been accepted, so I was in the business school. But I would take some of the classes, and then I left. Worth Gardner, who was the head of the program, made it possible for me to, pursue that degree without the financials, and because he believed in me. But I got my equity card like the second summer, so I only went 2 years. And as soon as I got that equity card, it was after my sophomore year. I just went to New York, and I remember I had like $35. Like, it's crazy. But I just always knew that I wanted to do that. And I just sort of did it, so yeah, I left, I graduated early, and I was in New York.
And that's 1980s New York. That's Ed Koch. That's, mean streets. A little different than today.
Is that when you mentioned earlier, you were waitressing at the comedy clubs? Was that because you were in that area and you wanted to be near the clubs and the theaters, or were you actually thinking of being a stand-up comic, or was it just a gig?
No, I was never
was
thinking.
Okay, so it was just like a way, sort of
job that somebody was like, this could be fun. I was like, oh, okay. But like, I started out with those terrible jobs, like the singing telegram. So like, I'd have like a cardboard cutout of Manhattan, and I'd have to get on the subway, and I was doing that stuff. And I was working at Wendy's. I got fired because I have small hands, and I was putting like 8 bun marks in the bun. So I got fired. I mean, like, it was the weirdest trajectory, but I lied because I didn't have an agent, and my friend Mitch was like, they're doing this Broadway show, and it was my first Broadway show. It was called Do Black Patent Leather Shoes Really Reflect Up? And he goes, you're really right for this part. And I was like, well, I don't have an agent. I don't have an appointment. He goes, well, we're at NOLA Studios today until 4. And so I went over there and I just sat there till they called a girl's name and she didn't go answer. Nobody answered. So I went in the room and I got that job. It was crazy.
Wow. Holy cow. That is crazy. Wait, so you weren't even like on a list. You weren't supposed to be there. You just went in on like and got the gig. Wow. Holy cow.
Yeah. And like while I'm singing, they're like looking at the 8x10, like, who are you? And then I thought, oh God, I'm in trouble. And then it was Tommy Walsh, who was Tommy Toon's assistant. And he goes, you know what I think? And I was like, oh God. I was like, no, what? He goes, I think you just got your first Broadway show. Like it was dream-like. It was so magical. It was downhill from there, as you probably know. But you know what I mean? Like it was.
Yeah, but you just mentioned you were like the Cincinnati School of Business. Was there? I mean, what kind of training? Like, was it just? It's unbelievable. Just
basic, like associate bachelor's degree, because my parents were determined that I have the skill set to get a real job. But my heart wasn't in it, and I was a good student, but like I didn't know what I was doing. So I was just taking those generalized business classes, and
were you taking acting classes too, though, like on the side, or?
No, I didn't even. But that's when I met all those people that summer at Opryland. So they're like, we're doing this. And I was like, well, that seems more fun than what I'm doing. And so I just started doing that. And, I couldn't sing. I was tone deaf, basically. Like I was a terrible singer. I didn't have any proper training. But Worth Gardner, who ran that department, just taught me everything that I think I needed. And it was really a magical time. And I don't know how interested or how much you guys follow theater, but it was that great group of like Faith Prince, we were roommates, and then it was Liz Calloway, it was all that group of people. So I felt really lucky to be.
Wow.
Guys and Dolls, right? Faith Prince was Guys and Dolls. Right?
Yeah.
And then 40 years later, you got the Bay Street Theater and Masterclass back in New York. But I bet that must have been amazing. Yeah, I mean, but you mentioned you're still those 2 episodes of Seinfeld.
Yeah.
That brings the most, I guess, visibility.
Working like with the young ones who are kind of like, who's that crazy old character lady? And then like a week of rehearsal will go by, and then ultimately, inevitably, one of them will come up to me and go, oh, I just realized you're George's secretary. And I'm like, you're 27. Like it really has resonated with so many people. It's more than anything. Once they find out I'm in Finding Nemo, that's a kind of a kitschy thing. But the Seinfeld thing, was a big deal.
Well, you're in a lot of children things, Dr. Stuffins, the whole thing, right? I mean,
you see, I'm in a lot of children shows.
Yeah, no, I mean, you are. Listen, I got some young kids having to watch this stuff, so you're all your name.
Phineas and Ferb and
yes,
stuff.
when we were doing news radio, me and Dave Foley and Andy Dick got an audition for Bug's Life, and we were all there at the same time. And Dave ultimately was hired. I wasn't. Andy wasn't. And then I got an offer just out of the blue to do Finding Nemo years later. And they said they had liked my voice, so they had saved it, and they would play it under different animation characters until they found one that fit. That blew me away.
That is crazy, huh? Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. So they're looking for like a voice, and then wanted to match it and then match it to if it's like a distinct. That's interesting. Yeah, that is.
And like Ellen was in that. There was all these Ray Romano. Ray Romano was in the pilot of News Radio, and he was fired.
Yeah, he was Rogan's part, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, it's right.
And
He was
so
Rogan's
funny,
part.
but he kept saying to me, "I don't think they like me. I don't." I was like, "How can you be saying that?" And then one day he just wasn't there. He's laughing all the way to the bank.
Right.
But
Worked out.
That worked out the way it was supposed to. But yeah, it was just it was a pretty magical time. But yeah, it was just, I could go on and on. Yeah.
So 2 episodes of Seinfeld, they obviously brought you back. Was there any talk about a third one or coming back for the finale? I know you probably have an opinion on the finale where they brought people back, the whole thing.
I didn't. It's weird.
You were done? You were done after your episodes?
Or
did you continue watching the show at all, Seinfeld, or you weren't really?
Now I enjoy. My husband is a huge Seinfeld fan. I was a fan, but I was doing my own thing, so I wasn't a fan of it in real time the way other people were. But also, it was kind of it overlapped with news radio. It overlapped with Damn Yankees on Broadway. So I was sort of in my own lane at that point.
Wasn't Jerry in an episode of News Radio, actually, speaking of overlapping? We think he was in an episode of News Radio, like a random episode.
A rando? Oh my God.
I may be off on that, but I thought it was
Chris,
right?
a scene with Maura and Phil, like at a restaurant.
Yeah, it was just like the 3 of them.
Okay, like a stunt casting moment.
He may have known. I'm pretty sure he must have had maybe a relationship with Phil at some point, because Phil was on Seinfeld, just his voice. But Phil Hartman had his voice on a Seinfeld episode. He was calls up Elaine. Yeah,
I missed him.
Yeah.
That was such a dark thing.
I can't. Yeah,
Not to bring everyone.
Right. Well, I mean, Lovitz was on Seinfeld too. All these connections. Everyone, like you said, is a small.
Lovitz was
small little
responsible for getting Phil into Saturday Night Live to get that audition. Yeah.
Oh wow, I didn't know that story.
Yeah.
Incredible what is kind of a small world it is, and even in Hollywood, right? I mean, the connections keep going on and on. So I guess these days, do you want to get back in TV, or is it primarily, I know theater's your first love and you do an incredible job with that.
It's a funny thing when you're a woman in television, especially, a character woman, you become sort of invisible at a certain age. And it can feel cruel. It's a cruel business. And so right around it happens sort of like I was 48 or, I just remember I was oh, I'm invisible, in a way I wasn't before. I was too old to be the friend, too young looking and offbeat to be the mom. And it was my husband who said, "You got to get out of here. You got to go back to New York. You're losing the skip in your step," and that was in 2017. And then I got Anastasia, and then I've been able to cultivate those relationships in this city to get more and more theater. And, I've done Hello, Dolly. I've done Gypsy. I've done all these musicals. And, a couple of years ago, I said, I just want to do plays. I want to challenge myself. And that's when Masterclass happened. I'd like to do some more drama, August Osage, some really meaty acting type things. But I would, of course, I loved television. I just did a movie in Utah called Too Soon. It's a really interesting project, and I get to sing in it, which is cool. So yeah, I go wherever they'll have me, and so I just sort of, I wait to be invited in. You can't force any of that stuff, and it's interesting because there's a lot of my peers who are offer only, and I'm like, really? Because the casting people are 12 now. You kind of need to be willing to go in the room. And I'm a workhorse, so I don't mind doing that. I think it helps everybody. But yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's a new era, and COVID, and they had Zoom kind of auditions. But that's what makes it even more incredible, is that how you got the Seinfeld role. because Mark Hirschfeld is kind of the famous casting director of Seinfeld, and boy, was he good.
Oh man, that's an art when it's done
Yeah.
well.
But for Marjorie to pick you, and boy, did you knock it out of the park perfectly. So it's
with
just
the hair and the glass. That you had those glasses were great that you had on too as well.
I know it.
Outfit.
Little Ada.
You were, and listen, you worked for the Yankees, you know.
That's right.
I know.
Now, I always have to ask you, from Cincinnati, do you still follow the Reds or the Bengals in any way? Or you don't
I
care?
never followed them when I lived there. But my husband is a huge football fan and a huge baseball fan. And so like we have season tickets to the Mets, you know. Oh yeah, like he's
making a run.
I've become, interested in it because of him. He would not enjoy that Yankees shirt, however.
I'll take it. I already love you. And what's his football team?
He's Colorado. Because he lived there for a long, long time.
Okay.
And he had season tickets, great season tickets to what's the name of that team? Sorry, the
Broncos. Yeah,
Broncos. Yeah, and all of a sudden during COVID, he was informed that because he wasn't showing up to all the games, they took his season tickets away.
It's bogus, man.
Right?
Yeah. A lot of the teams did weird stuff during that too. They made you buy the tickets even though they weren't playing, a whole thing.
Yeah. But he's really excited about this new kid, the hitter, on the Mets, what's his name?
The cat Alvarez?
No.
Lindor?
No, he's an Asian fellow. He's the big deal on the Dodgers, not the Mets. The Dodgers.
Ohtani.
Ohtani. Yeah. Did I just say? Oh, he would just be so embarrassed. No,
I can edit around that for you. Don't worry.
That's embarrassing. Yeah.
It's all good. It's all good. Well, listen, Vicky, what can we say? What a career you've had. What a career you continue to have. But
yes,
you are forever Ada to everybody, especially our fans. We can't thank you enough for spending some time with us tonight.
Thanks for being so patient with the scheduling. And it's my pleasure to be on. I love what you guys are doing. Keep it up. If anybody ever, backs out at the last minute, I owe you one. I can put a wig on and pretend to be someone else if you need me to be.
Thank you so much.
This has been great, Ada, Vicky.
Thank you.
All
Vicky.
the best. Have a great night and a great rest of the week. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it. Take care. Be safe.
Cheers.
Bye. Cheers.